I think winning the Stahr Award really means a lot, and I think that it is kind of a great capstone to the last 4 years of my experience, not only as a student leader, but just as a student in general. So I think out of all of the things that I've done, I think by far the most impactful has been my being student body president. The president gets an automatic seat on the BFC. They don't necessarily get a seat on the UFC, but I was appointed to that. I was the chair of the All University Student Association that represented the student governments from all 9 of IU's campuses. So a lot of those things were kind of a result of that. To be honest, I mean, not that all of those committees and everything didn't mean anything. They definitely did. But I would honestly say, for me personally, the most formative experience was being chair of the Committee for Fee Review. Basically, it's the student group that makes recommendations for how the student activity fee should be divided. So there I was allocating $60 million. That in and of itself, I think, was just like dumbfounding to me. But for me personally, I think it developed a lot of skills. It taught me a lot about different ways to achieve kind of the same thing. If I'm trying to do something and I approach it one way and it doesn't work, I just have to try again. And I think the committee kind of really did a lot of that work. And I hope that when I come back to visit the university in 10 or 15 years, I can hear about how those programs and programs like them are continuing to benefit IU students.
I spent the last 4 years doing over 1,200 hours of research with Professor Todd Haw at the business school. We actually are in the process of getting our law review article published. We were just hearing about that this week, which is really awesome and something I never thought I would have been doing. I'm not an aspiring lawyer, but it's really pushed me to really broaden my scope and think about how to ask these really broad and probing questions of academic inquiry. One of the reasons we wanted to take up this project is because no one really done it before, looking at athletes as victims of fraud, and it's a really interesting landscape right now. It became clear to me that me and my mentor were becoming leading experts in this field of athlete fraud, and that was a really big realization moment. This is culminating in something that's legit. It is gonna get read by a lot of people. Even though it's not something I'm pursuing with my career with environmental management, it's just really cool to have had that impact.
I work with the Women in STEM community here on Bloomington campus and also as a research ambassador. And I got to reach a lot of people just by talking about the gaps in knowledge and what I know and what I learned and what I want to learn. So I feel very lucky to have all these opportunities and meet all these amazing people and mentors who have helped me so far. For everyone, it's typical to think being a leader means you're in the front and you're super loud and you're super proud, but also being a leader means being able to kind of look back and step back and have this awareness of everyone around you and their needs and wants and being able to listen. I am a big advocate on the empowerment of human connection, and especially those one-on-one connections. It's been pretty fantastic and pretty eye-opening, and it really helped me to open my mind and become more mature and kind of understand there's no one correct answer, there's no one correct path. There's always a bigger answer and bigger picture to look at, and there's always something better that's going to come along for everybody. So that's what I believe. So.
I had a teacher in high school, a psychology teacher, which is weird, that sort of exposed me to learning just for learning's sake for the first time. And I'd never really been excited about school or much of anything before then. He started pointing me towards physics because all my questions ended up being very sort of foundational. And ever since then, I was hooked. I spent all my time doing that. Then looking at all the physics classes I could take, I was like, I need to do this. It seemed fun. I get really excited not knowing the answers to questions. And I get even more excited when other people don't know the answer. One of the things I love about being around scientists and researchers is how often I hear I don't know, or let's find out. That's what gets me up in the morning, questions and not knowing something.
Living in France and studying abroad in France was the best thing I did in college, for sure, because not only was I able to enroll at a local university, but I was also taking a bunch of different classes through this separate institution that I went abroad with, classes that I never would have expected to take here. So I got this really, really wide breadth of academic experiences. I took some different Paris architecture and history classes that don't fit into my usual course load here. So it was really eye-opening because I got to study a bunch of stuff that I hadn't studied before. It forces you to kind of slow down, understand what you're saying, be a little bit more articulate, because when you're speaking in not your native language, you have to slow down, you have to really pay attention to what you're saying. I think it's made me a more articulate person. I think it's made me a more worldly and compassionate peer and student, and I think it's driven me to travel way more in the future and really inspired me to keep studying abroad as much as I can.
I think if I had to pick one moment or one experience that I think really helped shape who I am as a person is when I worked with Professor Natalie Lieberman for her inclusive leadership class. She told me she was going to be teaching a class in the spring and she wanted to redesign how the class was done. And she wanted to ask me certain ideas of how I could do that. And so I said to her, you know, one of the things that's being talked about in those spaces, in those discussions that I'm a part of, is a need for a standardized guide that could help student organizations become more inclusive. So I said, what if your class essentially created that guide and consulted for Kelley Student Government? So that kind of began the conversation. And then all of that was shared with Kelley Student Government and Student Life Office so that they could start implementing that process. So that entire experience mostly taught me how it's important to keep in mind what the overall objective is. The bigger picture is to make Kelley a more inclusive, a more welcoming space for everybody. I never expected to have the impact that I did. It was a very unexpected surprise, and I'm very happy to have been a part of it.